Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into burnout.
Ooh, burnout.
Yeah, burnout. And we've got all sorts of sources. We've got like articles and advice pieces and even like a self-assessment thing.
Interesting.
So by the end, you'll know what burnout is, how to like recognize it, and what to do about it.
Cool.
So let's jump right in.
Yeah. You know, one of the things about burnout that I think is tricky is that it's really easy to confuse it with just regular stress.
Right.
But the sources we have actually make a really clear distinction between the two.
Oh, okay, so it's not just having a bad day or even a bad week.
Yeah, no, it's much deeper than that.
So what is it like? What are we talking about here?
Well, the sources point to three main signs of burnout. Exhaustion, cynicism, and this feeling of ineffectiveness.
So you're tired, you're negative, and you feel like you can't get anything done, no matter how hard you try.
Right. And one of the articles uses this really great comparison. It says that stress is like sprinting. You know, it's intense, but it's over quickly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can actually make you perform better. Burnout, on the other hand, is like running a marathon with no finish line in sight.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like this slow, steady drain on your energy.
Yeah, and it's scary because, you know, one of the articles actually mentioned that burnout can lead to some pretty serious health problems, like heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it could be that serious.
Yeah, so this is definitely something we need to take seriously. It's not something to just brush off.
For sure.
Okay, so if this is so serious, who's most at risk for burnout?
Well, it seems like anyone who's dealing with high levels of stress for a long period of time could be vulnerable.
Right.
The sources specifically mention helping professionals, so like psychologists and first responders, people who are constantly dealing with other people's problems and trauma.
That makes sense. They're dealing with some pretty intense stuff.
Yeah. But you know what was really interesting is that the sources also highlighted parents as being really susceptible to burnout.
Especially parents who are like striving for perfection.
Exactly.
Trying to do it all.
Which, let's face it, is a lot of parents these days.
Oh yeah. We put so much pressure on ourselves. So how do we know if we're actually experiencing burnout? Like how can we tell if it's more than just stress?
Well, one tricky thing is that some of the symptoms of burnout are actually similar to depression.
Oh, right.
But the key difference is that burnout is very specifically tied to a particular environment or situation, like work or even a specific relationship.
Gotcha.
So it's not just a general feeling of sadness or hopelessness.
Right.
It's directly connected to something in your life that's causing you chronic stress.
That makes sense. So what does that look like? Like what are some of the specific signs?
One of the articles painted this really vivid picture. Just imagine feeling totally drained, negative about your job, and just struggling to do even simple tasks.
Yeah.
And then you start having these escape fantasies.
Escape fantasies.
Yeah. You know, daydreaming about quitting your job and like running off to a deserted island.
Oh.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, that actually sounds amazing right now.
Right. But when you're experiencing burnout, these fantasies can feel really real and tempting.
Oh, wow. So it's like your brain is trying to find a way out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a desperate search for an escape route.
So it's not just the daydreams. There are other like emotional and physical symptoms too.
Right. The sources mention things like frustration, anger, irritability, anxiety, and physically, you know, you might have headaches, stomach issues, fatigue, like just feeling constantly tired.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to some of those. You know, it's interesting. One source actually outlined 12 stages of burnout.
12 stages?
Yeah, 12 stages, showing how it can like gradually escalate from being overly ambitious to like a complete breakdown.
Wow, that's kind of scary.
It is a bit scary.
But I guess also helpful, you know, to see how it progresses.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the stages are so relatable, like neglecting self-care.
Oh, yeah.
Blaming others for your problems, withdrawing from your loved ones.
It's like a slow descent into despair.
Yeah, it is. And it's important to remember that these stages aren't like a rigid checklist. It's more of a general framework to help us understand how burnout can develop over time.
So what's the good news? Is there any good news here?
Well, the good news is that even though we might not be able to control like all the things that cause burnout, we can definitely control how we respond to it.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, there are things we can do to manage it and even prevent it.
Okay, so what can we do?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
So it sounds like we've got a lot we can do to actually combat this burnout thing.
Yeah, the sources are, like, packed with practical strategies.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, a lot of them emphasize, like, the basics. Taking care of our basic needs.
Okay, like what?
You know, like exercise, sleep, eating a healthy diet.
Right, the things we all know we should be doing but don't always do.
Exactly. It's easy to let those things slide when we're feeling, stressed and overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure.
But the sources really stress that we can't pour from an empty cup,
That's a good way to put it.
We have to take care of ourselves first.
Right.
We want to have the energy and resilience to actually deal with everything else.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first.
Exactly.
Before helping others.
And it doesn't have to be, like, huge changes either. Even small things can make a big difference.
Like what?
Like, I don't know, going for a walk on your lunch break.
Okay.
Or swapping out that sugary snack for a piece of fruit.
Yeah, little things can add up.
Definitely.
So basic needs, check. What else?
Boundaries.
Boundaries, okay.
The sources talk a lot about setting boundaries.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, learning to say no to things that drain us or overwhelm us.
Which, I have to say, is really hard sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Especially, in a culture that's all about, like, being busy all the time.
Right, like you're not working hard enough if you're not, exhausted all the time.
Exactly.
But these sources remind us that saying no to some things actually allows us to say yes to the things that really matter.
That's a good point.
To the people and the activities that bring us joy.
It's about being intentional with our time and energy.
Exactly.
One of the articles even suggested making like a not-to-do list.
A not-to-do list.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's like a way to identify those activities or commitments that are just energy drains.
Okay.
And then consciously choose to let them go.
Wow. I actually really like that idea. I'm going to try that.
Me too.
So we've got basic needs, boundaries. What about forgiveness?
Forgiveness.
Yeah. One of the sources talked about the importance of practicing forgiveness.
That's an interesting one. How does that tie into burnout?
Well, when we're feeling burned out, we often carry a lot of resentment and anger.
Yeah, I can see that.
We might be angry at our boss, our colleagues, even ourselves,
right,
for letting things get to this point.
So it's about, like, letting go of that anger and resentment.
So you free up some mental space.
Yeah, it's about choosing to move forward with a more positive outlook.
And speaking of positivity, one of the sources talked about the importance of perspective.
Oh, yeah, like reframing our thoughts.
Exactly.
Challenging those negative thought patterns that contribute to burnout. Right, so instead of saying, I can't handle this,
you'd see.
This is tough, but I'm going to find a way to manage it.
Yeah, it's like a subtle shift in language, but it can make a big difference in how we feel.
For sure.
It's about taking control of our inner dialogue,
And focusing on what we can control.
Yeah, which can be really empowering.
Definitely. And another thing that can be really empowering is finding meaning in our work.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, it's about feeling connected to what we do.
Right.
Seeing the value in it.
But what if your job just doesn't feel meaningful?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Like, what if you're stuck in a role that you just don't care about?
Well, one source suggested that even in those situations, we can try to focus on the positive impact our work has on others.
Okay.
Even in small ways.
So, like, even if you don't love your job, you can still find satisfaction in knowing that you're helping someone.
Exactly. It could be helping a customer, supporting a colleague.
Yeah.
Or just making someone's day a little bit brighter.
It's about shifting our focus from what we're getting out of our work to how we're contributing to something larger than ourselves.
I like that.
Me too. And along those lines, one article talked about the importance of building relationships with our colleagues.
Oh yeah, creating that sense of community at work.
It's like having a support system.
Right there with you.
Yeah, people who get it.
People who understand.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's taking breaks.
Breaks?
Yeah, like actually giving ourselves permission to step away from work.
Oh, that's important.
It is, and it's something a lot of us struggle with.
I know I do.
Me too. But we need to recharge,
Yeah, we need to press the reset button.
Exactly.
So how do we do that? What do we do during these breaks?
Well, and that's where hobbies and passions come in.
Okay.
Doing things that we enjoy.
Things that light us up.
Exactly.
So it's not just about resting.
No.
It's about actively engaging in things that bring us joy.
Right. It's about remembering that we're more than just our jobs with interests and passions.
Exactly.
So it seems like we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have. Basic needs, boundaries, forgiveness, perspective, meaning, relationships, breaks, passions. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It's like a whole approach to well-being.
A holistic approach.
Exactly.
It's about taking care of ourselves on every level.
Physically, mentally, emotionally.
Even spiritually.
And it's about creating a life that feels balanced and meaningful.
And sustainable.
Yes, sustainable.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place to pause for now.
Okay.
We'll wrap things up and offer some final thoughts in the last part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time talking about burnout, what it is, what causes it, what it looks like.
Yeah, a lot of information.
But now I think, like, the big question is,
the big question,
what do we do about it?
How do we, actually apply all this stuff to our lives?
Exactly.
Because, knowledge is great, but if we don't actually do anything with it,
right,
it's not going to help us.
Yeah, so what are, the key takeaways here? What can we actually do to prevent burnout or to manage it if we're already experiencing it?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is just realizing that burnout is not a life sentence.
Okay.
It's not something you just have to, live with.
Right.
There are things you can do to get better.
Yeah, and one of the things that really struck me from these sources is that a lot of it comes down to, taking care of ourselves.
Self-care.
Yeah, self-care.
Which can be hard, because we're so busy taking care of everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Our jobs, our families, our friends.
Right.
But we have to remember that we can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, we've got to fill ourselves up first.
Exactly.
So what does that look like? What are some practical things we can do to fill our cups?
Well, I think it goes back to some of those basic needs we were talking about earlier, like making sure we're getting enough sleep.
Okay.
Eating healthy foods, moving our body.
Yeah, those are so important.
They really are. And then there's the mental and emotional side of things, like setting boundaries, learning to say no.
Right, and that can be really tough.
It can be, but it's essential.
Yeah, if we're constantly saying yes to everything, we're going to burn ourselves out.
Exactly. And we talked about the importance of finding meaning in our work.
Yeah, remembering why we do what we do.
And if we're not feeling that connection,
maybe
it's time to reassess.
Maybe it's time for a change.
Possibly.
Yeah, and then there's the whole idea of nurturing our passions.
Ah, yes, our passions.
Doing things that bring us joy.
Things that light us up.
Exactly.
Because when we're engaged in things that we love, it gives us energy.
Right.
It recharges us.
And it reminds us who we are outside of work.
Exactly.
So it's really about creating a life that feels
balanced,
meaningful,
and sustainable.
Sustainable, yeah. Because if it's not sustainable, we're just going to end up right back here.
Back to burnout. Exactly.
So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
If burnout is often a sign that we've been giving too much of ourselves, where in your life could you benefit from setting healthier boundaries?
That's a great question. It's something for all of us to think about.
Definitely.
So on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this deep dive into burnout.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And we hope you found it helpful.
We hope you learned something.
And as always, thanks for listening.